The grid method helps you get everything exactly the right size and in the right place. It's similar to those coloring books you might have had where you copy exactly what you see in each square. Also, the Renaissance artists used this, such as this etching by Dürer showing someone making use of that. Usually when using the grid method, we are using a photographic reference. So let's say you have a photograph that you want to use to create a drawing from, and the photo happens to be 4 inches tall and 5 inches wide. And then let's say you want a drawing that's going to be larger, and you want the drawing to be 10 inches wide. We need to figure out what is going to be the height of the drawing so that it's proportionate to the photo. So we're setting up a proportion here, and we're trying to figure out what the height's going to be. So I could use a variable, I could put x. And then we're going to use the method of cross multiplying. So I'm going to multiply 4 times 10, and that will equal what 5 times x equals, or 5 times the height. So I multiply 4 times 10 and get 40, and then I'm going to divide by 5, and I realize that x equals 8. So the height of my drawing needs to be 8 inches in order to be proportionate to the photograph. The next step is to grid the photograph. And so you can do this just on a printed photo, but I'm going to do it on Photoshop. So what I'm doing is I'm making a line every inch. And so I'm going to put a 1 inch by 1 inch square grid across this photo. So first I did vertical lines every inch, and then I did horizontal lines every inch. The next thing, to keep track of the squares, what we're going to do is I'm just going to number the squares going across. So I'm basically numbering each column, much like if you've ever played the game Battleship. Next, I'm going to letter each row going down on the side. Notice that I started in the first upper left-hand square. A common mistake is that a lot of times people kind of skip that first row in that first column. So we have that 1A up in the corner. All right, now I need to put the same proportionate grid onto my drawing. So on the photo, if I have 4 inches for my height and I divide that into 4 squares that are each an inch, and going across my width, I have 5 inches that I divide into 5 squares that are 1 inch each. I need to have the exact same number of squares on my drawing. So my drawing also has to have 4 inches going up on the height and 5 squares going across for the width. So if my drawing has a height of 8 inches, and I need to get 4 squares in there, I need to figure out how large the squares are going to be. So I'm going to take 8 inches, divide it by 4 squares, and I realize that the square is going to be 2 inches. And the same thing for the width. If I take 10 inches for the width and I need to make 5 squares, each square is going to be 2 inches. So on my drawing, each square is going to be 2 inches by 2 inches. So I'm scaling up in this case. Using a ruler, I'm going to go ahead and put that 2 inch by 2 inch square grid onto my drawing. And so I line up the 0 on the ruler at the left side of the drawing, and I mark off every 2 inches. Now if I only measure once and I try to draw a straight line, I could still get my ruler crooked. So I'm going to measure a second time at the top as well. So I'm going to line up 0 on the ruler with the left side of the drawing and mark off every 2 inches. That way I have 2 marks to make sure I get a straight line and my lines end up being vertical and not slanted. Now that I have the columns made, so I've got the width divided into 5 squares, I'm going to do the same thing for the height here. So I am marking off every 2 inches on both sides, and then I'm going to go ahead and draw those lines. The next step is to number the columns and letter the rows just like I did on the photo, so it matches exactly. The next step is to copy exactly what you see in each square of the photo onto your drawing grid. So I'm going to start in square A2. So if you look at the photo, the shell starts on the bottom of that square about a third of the way from the bottom left corner, and then it hits the right side of square A2 about a little bit about in the middle of that square, maybe slightly below. I like to go ahead and make those marks on the square first on the sides and then draw my line to connect them so that I'm making sure that I'm keeping accurate with the grid. Another option for this grid method is, if you don't have a printed photograph, you could also just use a photo editing program to grid off your photo. So here I have my photo, and I can even crop it to the size I want. Now, if I'm doing it on the computer, I will do it the exact same size that my drawing is. So if my drawing is going to be 8 inches by 10 inches, I would make the photo on the computer 8 inches by 10 inches. And then I'm in Photoshop right now, so I've made the rulers visible so that I can then go ahead and add the grid lines. Another option is to make a proportionate viewfinder and put a proportionate grid on it and then hold that in front of your subject. I used just wire for this one, but probably acetate would work better, and then using just a marker to draw out your grid on there would be better. I just didn't have acetate at home. This is similar to what Renaissance artists would do, where they'd have a little window screen with the grid on it. Here's a photo from outdoorpainter.com where you see the grid set up next to the canvas.